Welcome to We the Village, produced by Ron Hall, and I am your host, Sharonda Allen. Today's episode will focus on the Black economic surge. Recently, we've had the killings of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Philando Castile in Minnesota. Unfortunately, these deaths have been a trend. There are groups such as Black Lives Matter and also individuals who have been in the streets in various cities across the United States and across the world who are protesting the killing of Black men and women in police custody. We've had Trayvon Martin and Sean Bell. I had a friend who was killed while I was in college. His name was Maliki Raymond. And many of these officers are not convicted. They are not brought up on charges. They are still able to have their jobs, their positions, they're put on paid leave. And unfortunately, that's very unfair. And to date, in 2016, there have been at least 136 African Americans who have been killed by the police. And many are calling for better training and an end to racial profiling. In the 1990s, the New Jersey State Troopers were brought up on charges. There were lawsuits filed against them for racially profiling African Americans on many of the major highways, and they were found to be guilty, and they had to make accommodations to end their policy of racial profiling African Americans who were especially in high-end vehicles. If we look at this from a historical perspective, when we have African Americans who have been killed disproportionately, we look at Ida B. Wells. She had an anti-lynching campaign. Many people are comparing a lot of the killings of African Americans in our modern times to past episodes of lynching. And unfortunately, Ida B. Wells had to have a flag, a banner, hung outside of her offices that said, "A man was lynched yesterday," and most likely a man had been lynched. We're only midway into 2016. And it almost appears as though there's someone who could account for almost every day who is killed by a police officer. We need the police officers. We need them to keep law and order, but we also want to make sure that all people in America are treated fairly. And as someone said, people say, oh, well, why are you saying Black Lives Matter, all lives matter? And then they say Blue Lives Matter. But as D.L. Hughley has stated, and I will quote him, you don't run to a breast cancer rally or march or walk and say, well, colon cancer matters too. Right now, our focus is about the disproportionate killing of Black lives, the loss of Black lives at the hands of those who are set to protect and serve. And much of this aggression, we look at some of the history of like the burning of Black towns. Why? Because we have many of the hate groups today who are rising up and they are spewing so much hate speech across the internet. I myself had an inbox from a hostile woman of a different race, and she called me a stupid A-word, N-word. And many people are experiencing this, and many of these people, for example, people who work at corporations, they are being dismissed because of some of their racist posts. Many are saying that they're going to run over Black Lives Matters protesters who are blocking traffic. And unfortunately, we just had a situation in Nice, France, where a tractor trailer had run over a large group of people who were celebrating Bastille Day. Very unfortunate incident. It's July 2016, and we are having so many issues and attacks and people who are losing their cool and losing their sanity and attacking different groups back and forth. We have police officers who've been killed in Dallas, police officers who were recently killed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And both sides, every side, we need peace. And many of the historical situations of this magnitude have occurred. And just to name a few of the burning of Black towns, in September of 1906, white mobs beat and stabbed an estimated 40 African Americans because of allegations by a woman. Then, of course, we know about the Red Summer in 1919. I'll just give you two examples. One is in the city of Chicago. We had race riots, and we had angry white mobs who were hostile about the great migration of African Americans moving to northern cities from the Deep South. And they came for better economic opportunities. The riot started because of racial tensions and kicked off with the drowning of an African American boy who defied the unofficial laws of segregation at a Chicago beach. He was drowned by this mob. In Washington, D.C. in 1919, as a result of unemployment amongst the white residents, they had resentment against the influx of African Americans who had previously lived in segregated neighborhoods as they moved into the Capitol Hill, Foggy Bottom, and Old Downtown neighborhoods. At least 15 people were killed during those particular race riots. In 1921, one of the most infamous situations that we know of in history, the burning of Black Wall Street, which occurred in the most prosperous black town that we've had. This black town in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the community of Greenwood, had a higher GDP than Wall Street in New York City. There were so many African American professionals. There were doctors, lawyers, lots of black-owned businesses. And unfortunately, because of allegations and resentment and jealousy, this town was burned down. Over 300 African Americans were killed. And it was actually the first city in the United States that was bombed by air using military-grade bombs. Then in 1923, we have Rosewood in Florida. And this was a horrific massacre of African Americans after a white woman accused a black drifter of rape. And as a result, the black town was burned down. The black residents hid in the swamps for days, and they never returned to their destroyed homes. There were over 15 people killed. The actual death toll was not recorded as accurately as some witnesses have stated. Now, let's look at healing and solutions. See, historically, as African Americans, we have had situations of economic prosperity. Many times in history, we talk about the timeline, the chronology of slavery, segregation, the civil rights movement, and then here we are today in various civil rights acts. What we need to also look at is that during the time of segregation, which started in 1896 and ended in 1954, we have had many prosperous towns, and we had our own institutions and banks and schools and a variety of movie theaters and all sorts of enterprises. And many people are actually looking to go back to this sort of economic independence. And this recent spur of police killings and of African Americans in police custody, which in the past, many of these situations have been passed off as, well, he had a gun and I felt threatened, but these things have been recorded and you cannot dispute the video evidence. So many are calling for a black economic surge, and many rappers and various celebrities such as Killer Mike, who is advocating depositing money into black banks. Solange Knowles, who is Beyonce's sister, is advocating putting money into black-owned and black-run banks. Cedric the Entertainer actually hosted a meeting of various black Hollywood celebrities, and they came up with ideas. I'm not quite sure of all of what they talked about because I wasn't there, but many of them are going to City Hall in Los Angeles to protest some of the disparate treatment. And as we know that in Los Angeles, there was a wonderful, prosperous black community on Central Avenue, which was destroyed by Klansmen who had come from Alabama and become police officers. We had wonderful, prosperous communities in North Carolina, all over this country. And because of the disrespectful nature of how many African Americans feel that we have been dealt with. Many are calling for this, bringing the economics back home. African Americans have a buying power of over $1 trillion. And it takes about 60 minutes for those dollars to leave the community. And when I've seen online people who have complained about this movement and are having adverse reactions to it, but no one ever complains about other communities and ethnicities, other ethnic groups and religious groups who make sure, for example, from what I understand, the Jewish community wants to make sure that their dollar goes through 11 Jewish hands before it leaves their community. And there's no problem with that. And other ethnicities should not be penalized or have disgruntled or adverse comments or reactions because they want to have that sort of economic empowerment or activity in their own communities. And I'll also bring some history about Maggie Lena Walker. She started the St. Luke's Penny Savings Bank in 1903, and she became the first Black female bank president. Her home is actually preserved by the National Park Service. It is a National Historical Site in Richmond, Virginia. I frequently take students there when I do college tours, and they love it because she had an elevator in her home, she was very wealthy, and it actually empowered the community at large, the bank and all of the situations in the organization that she had. And as a result of all of this Black economic surge, this spike in opening accounts at Black banks has overwhelmed many of these banks. Many have seen online account openings that are unprecedented. There's been over $800,000 that was infused into one particular bank in Atlanta. And I'm just going to name 38 Black-owned banks and credit unions and their city and state. We have the Omega Psi Phi Credit Union in Lawrenceville, Georgia, the Phi Beta Sigma Federal Credit Union in Washington, D.C., One United Bank in Los Angeles, California, the FAMU Federal Credit Union in Tallahassee, Florida, the Credit Union of Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia, the North Milwaukee State Bank in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Seaway Bank in Chicago, Illinois, the Harbor Bank in Baltimore, Maryland, the Liberty Bank in New Orleans, Louisiana, United Bank of Philadelphia in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the Alamerica Bank in Birmingham, Alabama, the Broadway Federal Bank in Los Angeles, California, Carver State Bank in Savannah, Georgia, Capital City Bank in Atlanta, Georgia, Citizens Trust Bank in Atlanta, Georgia, City National Bank in Newark, New Jersey, Commonwealth National Bank in Mobile, Alabama, Industrial Bank in Washington, D.C., First Tuskegee Bank in Tuskegee, Alabama, Mechanics and Farmers Bank in Durham, North Carolina, First Independence Bank in Detroit, Michigan, First State Bank in Danville, Virginia, Illinois Service Federal in Chicago, Illinois, Unity National Bank in Houston, Texas, Carver Federal Savings Bank in New York City, New York, United One Bank in Miami, Florida, One United Bank in Boston, Massachusetts, Tri-State Bank in Memphis, Tennessee, Citizens Bank in Nashville, Tennessee, South Carolina Community Bank in Columbia, South Carolina, Columbia Savings and Loan in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Liberty Bank in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Liberty Bank in Kansas City, Missouri, Citizen Trust Bank in Birmingham, Alabama, Liberty Bank in Chicago, Illinois, Liberty Bank in Jackson, Mississippi, Toledo Urban Credit Union in Toledo, Ohio, and the Hill District Credit Union in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Many of these banks have online banking opportunities, and if you like, you can go and search them and research the sort of account that you would like to open up. The City National Bank in Newark, New Jersey offers online banking. A variety of them do, and there's also rewards banking that you can open up an account. The savings account, there's a minimum of $50 as a deposit. There's the checking and the savings, they're both $50 as a deposit. And there's an app, and there's a network of ATMs to use. Now, a few years ago, Black Enterprise magazine came up with a list. They came up with the Black Enterprise Declaration of Financial Principles. I've done a financial literacy episode in the past, and one of the things that we know is that financial literacy is very important. Financial literacy, illiteracy, is what has kept a lot of people in poverty, not knowing or understanding banking and savings, not understanding investment, home economics in general, just balancing a checkbook, leaving a legacy, all sorts of things. And so I'm going to read this Black Enterprise Declaration of Financial Empowerment, the principles of it. And what you're supposed to do is you say I, and then you put your name. And from this day forward, declare my vigilant and lifelong commitment to financial empowerment. I pledge the following. I would hope that all of you would pledge the following. Number 1, to use home ownership to build wealth. Number 2, to save and invest 10% to 15% of my after-tax income. 3, to commit to a program of retirement planning and investing. 4, to engage in sound budget, credit, and tax management practices. 5, to measure my personal wealth by net worth, not income. Number 6, to be proactive and knowledgeable about investing, money management, and consumer issues. Number 7, to provide access to programs that will educate my children about business and finance. Number 8, to support the creation and growth of profitable, competitive Black-owned enterprises. Number 9, to use a portion of my wealth to strengthen my community. Number 10, to ensure that my wealth is passed on to future generations. I have committed to this unwavering personal covenant as a means of bolstering myself, my family, and my community. In adopting this resolution, I intend to use all available resources, wisdom, and power to gain my share of the American dream. And it says agreed and signed. And you date it. And this was found at www.blackenterprise.com. I think this particular declaration is very important because it gives us a guide. As I mentioned, some of the celebrities, we have some of the athletes now who are coming together, and they are calling on other athletes to infuse money and funding into the communities that they came from. Many of these communities are suffering economically for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, many of the communities have had devastation from drug epidemics, the AIDS epidemic, epidemics of undereducation, marginalization, mass incarceration. And if those athletes and those with the wealth, with the resources, would funnel those resources to empower the communities that they come from, we could see a great uplift and influence in these particular communities. And those things are important. We have to also personally commit ourselves to this sort of economic empowerment and uplift. We must find the resources. There are lots of websites that can help us. For example, the blackcommercenetwork.com, the blackwealthbootcamp.com, theblackbusinessschool.com, blackbillionairesoftomorrow.com, blackcrowdfunders.com, officialblackwallstreet.com, blackoutcoalition.org, theblackmall.com, Black Economic Surge Group on Facebook. You can search that. Also, we have to look at accountability of our organizations, our churches, our benevolent organizations that are historical, the Divine Nine. If you are a member of organizations and clubs and churches, go back to your membership, to your leaders, and make sure that when you meet together, that you are involved in activities that will uplift the people in your community, in your organization. It is time for people to wake up and not stay in stagnation and not stay in situations that are not conducive or productive. One of the things that we need to look at in our economic surge is purchasing items that are meaningful. You know, some people brag about having 200 pairs of Air Jordan sneakers. Air Jordan sneakers, you know, that may be nice, but you cannot leave them to your heirs. Make sure that you provide investments for your heirs. Make sure that you invest in life insurance policies for yourself so that your estate can be taken care of. It's a phenomenon where people have to do GoFundMe campaigns in order to pay for funerals. We need to also look at that estate planning in our communities and make sure that we are purchasing things that will increase in value and not depreciate. We have to make sure that we make purchases that are not about being flashy and showy. We have to reprioritize what we think is important, the things that we know are of value or not of value, and not focus on those things that will not grow us. We have to focus on making sure that our children have educationally rich environments. We can no longer allow them to listen to counterproductive music. One of the rappers, Meek Mill, has vowed to no longer rap about violence, which I think every rapper should be held accountable for spewing certain content which many in the communities that they look to as their demographic, as their customers, have taken on as their normalcy, as their handbook for behavior. Many of the rap lyrics have been mimicked with street crime. You know, art imitates life, life imitates art, and it's a vicious cycle. So we would hope that many of the artists and the performers would vow to stop putting negativity into the airwaves and focus on making sure that the people who are listening to their music have life and prosperity. We have to also make sure that our children are not watching shows that promote negativity, and make sure that they're not sitting in front of game consoles for long periods of time. Take them to places where they can learn. Show them. Teach yourself about economic principles, as I've given you various websites. Learn for yourself. Go back to your organizations. Bring more accountability. Bring your children. Create activities for your children. We have to move forward. We can no longer allow our community or any communities to be left by the wayside, to be destroyed. We have to build. And in making sure that we pay attention to ourselves, we also need to come up with budgets in our homes. Let's watch our spending. We want to make sure that we are economically viable. If you need to reboot your skills, there are classes and courses online. There are classes and courses at universities, at community colleges, where you can learn various skills and gain certifications. Try to have multiple streams of income. No one should just be a one pony show. We should all have a variety of money-making opportunities, multiple streams of income. Explore your talents, your skills, your abilities. Explore the things that you are good at. Make sure that you are licensed. Find out how to be a legitimate business. Find out how to run a business well. Find out how to be successful at business. Research the various skills and activities that you need to involve yourself in, and the networking and the conventions in order to be a successful entrepreneur. I hope that everyone has been awakened by the recent incidents. Unfortunately, we had to have negative situations and the death of people who were supposed to be protected and given due process. But because of those situations, people are realizing that we should have been doing these things all along, should have been embarking on these activities for a very long time. And I would like for everyone to make this commitment to yourself, to your family, to your community, to your ancestors, to all of the people historically who pushed and tried very hard under worse circumstances and conditions. Everyone, please, let's make sure that we are progressive. Let's make sure that we are productive. Make sure that you build yourself economically. Thank you for tuning in to We, the Village. My name is Sharonda Allen. Thank you very much.